Fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here, and this is possibly the third, fourth, maybe even fifth time that I've sat down to start recording this. I've been having trouble getting my thoughts together on this one, but this is a topic that normally I wouldn't cover a whole lot of. I think that most people are fairly reasonable on this point, and to be honest, normally this sort of thing would have me cowering in the corner as opposed to standing up and saying something, but I feel like lately in some circles of the community it's been popping up quite a bit, and it's something that I kind of want to address. It's sort of an elephant in the room lately, at least in the circles that I run in. There's probably going to be a lot of people watching this that are like, what the fuck is he talking about? But I feel like it needs to be discussed anyway, if for no other reason than to get it off my chest. I've got some thoughts about this that I just kind of need to unload. So, we're talking today about a man who I believe is the best of the Battletech writers. He wrote my favorite Battletech novel, and I generally prefer his work over the others. It's not to say that the others are bad, but I like particularly his style really grabs me. His characters are good, they're well done. I am, of course, talking about Blaine Lee Pardoe. And I may be mispronouncing that, but I believe it's pronounced Pardoe. Now, Mr. Pardoe has been a really, really stand-up guy, in my experience. I have talked to him briefly a time or two. Not very much. He's a busy guy, and I'm kind of a small-time person, but he's willing to respond to when somebody actually addresses him personally, and that's something that I find very admirable in somebody who's got kind of this level of notoriety about them. He has been writing for Battletech for a very long time, and, well, like I said, he wrote some of my favorite books. My favorite book of all time in the Battletech series is Highlander Gambit. I know I've mentioned it several times. It's very well done, in my opinion, and it kind of encompasses everything that I like about his style. So he's become kind of a controversial figure in the Battletech community, and I don't think that it's warranted. So I know I'm pretty late to this party. A lot of this drama really happened over the summer, but I've looked around and I haven't seen hardly anybody covering it. I think nobody wants to touch it with a 20-foot pole, but there's a lot of issues that I find people are taking with him that are either based on completely false information, or it's people who aren't willing to listen to somebody who may have a different opinion on something than them. So I'm going to kind of dive into the reason why there's a lot of this going on. But I kind of want to start and say why I even bothered to cover this. So, as I was saying, this is something that I've been encountering quite a bit of recently. So, I've been active in some Facebook groups, and I have seen some. I'm not on Twitter myself, but I do see in the Discord servers that I'm in, people share screenshots from Twitter and these lengthy feeds, and sometimes they'll link to them. And if I'm feeling particularly like my day is going a little bit too well, I'll go on Twitter and scroll through that and just kind of make my life miserable, because that's the type of person I am sometimes. So I see a lot of people saying things along the lines of, oh, I really like his Battletech books, but as a person he disgusts me, or I don't like his, or I don't have any respect for him after he put out this, or after he said this, or after I heard this, or when he was publishing this book. So I have established that he's a bad person, and so I'm not interested in his stuff as much as I used to. And I kind of want to put that to bed, because I think that's really unfair. I think it's very unwarranted, and frankly, if a lot of these people had ever actually bothered to talk with Mr. Pardoe, which I know a lot of times we don't think that we can just talk to somebody that is even mildly famous. Like, you just kind of assume they don't have time for you. I get that, but he's pretty active. He's almost always available, at least for like a couple exchanges of words. If you've ever actually spoken with him, you would know that these sorts of things that are being thrown around aren't true. So, one of the primary ones was a debacle that was happening over the course of a couple years, really. There's an individual who was going on social media and spreading some actual lies about Mr. Pardo and the things that he believes. He was being called some nasty names. He was being accused of holding some very despicable beliefs that nobody in their right mind condones. These are things that he's never supported in any way. And this particular individual wasn't even real. It's somebody who was assuming an identity to avoid any sort of criticism. And I don't want to get all political, but it kind of does tie into that a little bit. This person was using a certain group as kind of a shield against criticism. So this person was pretending to be a lesbian woman, despite the fact that he is actually a straight middle-aged man, and was simply using that as a cover so that people wouldn't call him out. Because people are a little hesitant to do that sometimes, because this is one of those communities that people are sensitive of. They don't want to, offend them. They don't want to get on their bad side. And he took this quality that people have, their sort of natural compassion and wanting to understand others and be understood by others, and used it to his advantage to push all this stuff on somebody that he decided that he didn't like. This seems to be, based on Mr. Pardo's words, someone that he knows personally. He seems to know quite a bit. It could be, we don't know exactly what's motivating this person to do it, but it's been an ongoing thing for a while. Mr. Pardo put out a public statement to this effect sometime back in June, I believe it was. And a big part of it was the build-up to the release of his latest book, which is called Blue Dawn. It's kind of a controversial thing. It's a Tom Clancy-esque alternate future political thriller type of book. And there were a group of people that got real bent out of shape over it, and one of the big ones was this particular person. I should probably get a little more specific. I wasn't going to give a name, but I feel like I kind of need to, just so that we can get that taken care of. So this is a person that goes by the name of Faith McCloskey, who, according to Mr. Pardo, who I would be inclined to believe based on my own interactions with him, I find that he's a fairly honest and trustworthy person in my experience. This is not a real person. It's someone who is claiming to be somebody else. The picture that they've used as their profile picture is not of them, because it's not a real person. It's somebody pretending to be someone else. The person actually has a criminal background. We don't know what this individual's real name is, which is probably for the best. We don't want to be the worst of the other side here and go and jump on them and then start pounding them into the dirt for it. That's not really who we are. It's not what we do. But this individual is not stable. They are not trustworthy. And all of this drama happened months ago. Some of you have probably already heard of it, but I know for a fact, because I've been on Facebook groups and Twitter threads, people still are pushing, to this day, a lot of the lies that were pushed by Faith McCloskey against Mr. Pardo, and it's formed a lot of public opinion about him. And I'm here to say, that's all lies, it's all fake. And that's kind of how a lot of this stuff goes nowadays, right? So somebody reports something that may or may not be true, everyone hops on a bandwagon and talks about it, and then when the truth does come out, it doesn't matter, because people have already made up their minds ages ago. And because it took Mr. Pardo a while to respond, he was going through some legal processes. Because of that, a lot of people took his silence to be an admission of guilt. Now, you can't exactly make a public statement right off the bat when somebody's doing actual defamation against you. You've got to be careful about what you say and what you don't say. So I don't blame him at all for taking his time making the reply. But a downside of that is that now everybody has already decided what the truth is for them, and they don't care about what the actual facts are. And this whole idea that he's some sort of terrible white supremacist, racist pig it's still floating around out there quite a bit, particularly on Twitter. I see it a little bit in the Facebook groups, but where it really seems to be taking root is on Twitter threads, and I'm sure that doesn't surprise anybody. We all know what a wonderful bastion and beacon of light and truth that Twitter is, right? But I guess my point in saying all of that is that if you've heard things about Mr. Pardo like that, there's a very good chance that the person who started those rumors isn't even a real person. It's an assumed identity from somebody else who knows Mr. Pardo personally and is trying to either destroy his career or his entire online presence. So just bear that in mind when you hear things about him. I think that's going to help you quite a bit. Moving on from that, I want to talk about Mr. Pardo as a writer. There are so many things about his work that I absolutely love. And even the people who don't like him or have heard these terrible things have decided to believe them. Even these people tend to say that they really like his work, and there's a very good reason for that. Blaine Lee Pardo is a fantastic writer. Particularly, I find his strength lies in his characters, characterization, his dialogue, and his ability to develop the relationships between characters over the course of a story. That's something that I take very seriously when I read. That's something that I look for. That's something that hits the positive chemical switch in my brain that makes me love a story or hate it. A lot of it comes down to the characters and how they interact with each other. And Pardo is consistent in his level of quality when it comes to that particular aspect. And basically everyone else can agree. Now, the plots of his stories can be a little hit or miss, and a lot of that is because he doesn't always have total control over what happens in a story. The way I understand it, I could be slightly mistaken, but I believe how it works typically is that he's given an overall plot from the people on high, so we need the story to do this. And so he sits down and figures out a way to make that work. This is my understanding based on interviews that he's done with people like No Guts, No Galaxy, which you should go watch, by the way, because he's got good content, and his interview with Mr. Pardo is absolutely fantastic. So a lot of times the plots in his stories can come across as a little bit weaker, but that's because that's written by somebody else, and he kind of has to work around it. So I think this is the case with one of his more controversial books like Hour of the Wolf. I saw a guy on the Facebook group who was getting really nasty to him in person. Like, actually, they were having an exchange, and some of the things that were being said by this person was, very rude, to put it lightly, but essentially blaming Mr. Pardo for things that really weren't his decision. When you read Hour of the Wolf, it's not a bad book. It's not a bad story. I think a lot of the problem comes from where they had to take things. The starting point of where they were with Dark Age and trying to work their way out of it. And when you consider the monumental task, I mean, everything that I've loved about Pardo's work is present in Hour of the Wolf. It's still got the fantastic dialogue. It's still got the strong characterization. It's got good interactions between them. I think that is the strength of Pardo's work. Also, his action scenes aren't half bad. That is all in there, and it's all interesting to read. And while I laughed my ass off a few times at some of the contrivances that happen in the plot, all in all, it kept me engrossed to the end because it's Pardo's work. It's his writing style, and it's very, very good. So, if you're having issue with the current age that we're in, it's not his fault. Please don't go blaming him for something that's not his fault. But I think that a lot of times people forget just how good he can actually be. And again, like I said, this is a guy who has written some of the best novels that Battletech has to offer. Now, I'm not saying that the other authors are bad. I have some issues with how Stackpole tends to write, and it's more of a personal taste thing than it is the actual objective quality of his work. I find that he tends to take a single character and make them the best thing ever, and then the story just kind of revolves around them being awesome, which can be fun if that's the type of thing you're into. You can have that sort of thing and enjoy it. It's not really what I like in when I'm reading a story. I like to have characters that are flawed. They're still good people and they're capable people, but they aren't perfect. They aren't succeeding all the time or having only like incredibly minor setbacks. I find this is the case with like characters like Victor Steiner Davian or Alaric Ward. They tend to succeed a little bit too much or have too many things conveniently fall into place for them to find success against all odds. I find that kind of tends to be in Stackpole's work, and it's not a huge problem because the books are still enjoyable, but I find that Pardo is able to take characters and make them more believable, if that makes sense. They feel more like actual people would when you're reading his stories, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love his stuff so much. But of course, Mr. Pardo doesn't just write Battletech fiction, not anymore. I guess he never did write just Battletech fiction, but he's branched out considerably more in recent years, especially since Battletech kind of went on a hiatus. And the work that he's done that's caused more of the kind of vitriol that I've seen toward him is a novel called Blue Dawn that came out in July. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't read this book. I don't know what all it contains. All I know is the synopsis that is put on the website, as well as the claims of people who also don't seem to have read it, but people who looked at the idea of it and found it to be so repulsive that they've kind of overreacted and just assumed that the book is full of hateful nonsense and man. So the basic gist of it is that it's 5 years in the future, an alternate future, and well, I'm going to have to use some political language here, but it's essentially that the quote-unquote liberals and left have taken over everything and essentially turned the world into a nightmare hellhole. And so it's a sort of, the title is clearly a play on Red Dawn. That's the sort of story that this seems to be. Again, I haven't read it, but that my assumption based on the marketing, the title, and the description is that that's the sort of story that it is. So Red Dawn, but instead of communists having taken over, and invaded America, it's more of the political opposition has won out and all their policies have been instated, and so now we're in a right old mess. I don't really know how I feel about that sort of thing. It seems a little silly to me, personally, but I am not a novelist, as much as I'd love to be. I haven't written anything, I haven't had anything published, and if a writer decides they want to write something, there's story potential there. You could make something interesting out of it, and I have no doubt that Mr. Pardo is able to create a good story out of that premise. But I think what people are misunderstanding is that it's not necessarily much of a statement on the views or beliefs of Pardo himself. I've seen a ton of people who read the premise for this book and essentially just said, well, he's clearly, a Trumper or a hardcore conservative, and he must be therefore he must be homophobic or racist or white supremacist and all this other type of stuff. Again, if that's what you think of Mr. Pardo, you have never spoken with him. I guarantee you, because that is not at all what this man is. He is a very polite individual. He's a very honest individual, very open, and he's not hateful at all. There's no room for hate in this man whatsoever. He's just a guy who likes to write stories. I think he probably, based on this book, has conservative leanings and decided to make a story out of it. People are saying that this sort of Red Dawn, but conservatives versus liberals, is some sort of crazy fantasy that he has going on in his head. I think that's kind of ignorant as to how the writing process works. Just because you think of a story doesn't mean that it's something that you want to happen. I seriously doubt that Tom Clancy wanted the Soviets to come up with a silent submarine that could sit off the coast of New York and bombard it with impunity with nukes. So I think that it's kind of silly to assume that he's written this because this is what he wants to happen in the future. I think he looked at where the future was headed from his particular worldview and said, huh, there's story potential here. I'm going to write a story about this, and maybe it'll be entertaining. And I'm almost positive that was the extent of it, because Mr. Pardo is not the type of person who would in any way condone or promote an idea of like revolution or militias or going out and killing your fellow Americans. None of that, which doesn't even seem to be what the story's about, but that's the type of thing that I see people saying about this story. And again, I'm almost positive that virtually everybody who's complaining about it hasn't read it. And that's the thing, you see that a lot, right? You see people who will look at something and they'll just have a gut reaction toward it without getting any context, and they'll make wild assumptions, and they'll start just posting about it all over Twitter and Facebook like they know everything about it. I guarantee you these people haven't read this book. Now, granted, I haven't read it either, so I could be completely wrong. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. There. Just ordered it. And you know what? I did it for 2 reasons. One, I want to know what's in this thing that everyone's so excited about. And 2, it's a book by Blaine Lee Pardoe, so I want to read it because I like the way he writes. But, I guarantee now that I've ordered the book, there's probably going to be some people that are claiming that I'm going to read it because I want this sort of future for America. I am on the side of this sort of thing, and I promote and condone this type of violence. You'll probably see some of that. And I'm here to tell you right now, no, I just look at this book and it seems like something I kind of want to read. I find it interesting. So you know what? Fuck it. I ordered it. And I think that's kind of the idea of how it got written too, because, I'm not very many of you have watched Twist of the Knife, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to. But that's enough to say that I am something of a writer myself. Yeah, we'll throw the meme up. Why not? I'm something of a writer myself. I'm not published. I'm not accomplished. I'm not anywhere near as good as Mr. Pardo, but I know enough about writing to kind of know how the creative process can hit, where you just kind of get an idea, you write down some notes, and if you think it could be an interesting story, then you write the whole thing out and you make it a story. And it doesn't always come from a fantasy that you're having or something that you want to see. It's just a story. And I am so sick and tired of people not letting us just have stories. A story has dangerous ideas in it, or, ooh, this isn't something that we want to happen, so we need to make sure that nobody can read a story about it. They might get the wrong idea. Like, it's what happened with when Joker came out. You remember that? People are like, oh, this is going to inspire people to come along, and they're going to want to be just like the Joker, and we're going to see shooting sprees. I went to see the movie in the theaters. There were cops there. Cops at a movie theater for a fucking Joker movie. Ridiculous. We're at the point now where you can't just have a story be a story. Everything's got to be a massive political statement. Everything's got to be, this is what you believe, and this is what represents you as a person, and we can tell everything about you by 1 or 2 stories that we've read by you. It's just absurd. It is just absolutely positively absurd. And every single big statement that Mr. Pardo has said, he has been nothing but reasonable. He's been well-spoken. He has been calm and very professional. There's no reason at all to assume the worst about this guy. None whatsoever. And frankly, I'm tired of seeing it. This is the Battletech community, right? We are some of the most patient and understanding people I've ever encountered. I came into this community from outside. I came from other places. And I was shocked at how welcoming and understanding this place could be. How little my opinion on anything outside of Battletech mattered. The most the most heated debate I've ever seen in the Battletech community is over the merits of Dark Age. Like, that's it. You want to say something political, most people just kind of go, dude, what are you talking about? We're here for the giant robots. So, why can't we do that with Mr. Pardo as well? You know? And I'm sure that a lot of people are sitting here listening to this and being like, well, yeah, that's what I do. I don't care what his politics are. I like his books. Well, good on you. You know, I think that a lot of people in my audience are like that, but there's they comments even on my videos or on my, just shitpost memes that I put on the Facebook group, and they want to have some sort of nasty thing to say about him, and it irritates me that we can't extend that same courtesy that we've been giving to each other for so long to the people who actually create the stuff that we love so much. Now, again, I'm sure that most of you guys are perfectly fine in this regard, and I'm convinced that this is sort of a vocal minority of people in this hobby. And there seems to be the same few, at least in the Facebook groups that I've seen, people who are vitriolic toward him, but it's dedicated vitriol. Like, every single post that involves him in any way, people feel the need to come in and blow their horn about it. And it's just silliness is all. We don't need to be having debates about the merits of his politics or his ideas. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It hasn't mattered for the past 3 or 4 decades, that he's been writing stuff that we've been enjoying. Did his politics matter when he wrote Measure of a Hero or Roar of Honor? No, it didn't. And it doesn't matter now. Like, you honestly think that his politics have changed suddenly and this is some sort of brand new revelation about him, a drastic shift in who he is, and so now we can't enjoy his stuff anymore? It's just ridiculous. He's the same guy he's always been. He's writing just as well as he always has. His quality is consistent almost across the board. I mean, not everything's a winner, but for the most part, it's good, solid stuff. And there's no reason to assume that he's not worth reading now just because he's decided to write some other types of stories that maybe you don't like, or he has an opinion that you disagree with. I think that's the biggest issue. When someone disagrees with you on something and you don't just... your automatic response is to shut it down. Like, there were people who actually went to CGL and tried to get him removed from the Battletech writing team. I'm not being hyperbolic here. They actually tried to make him lose his job over this. People say cancel culture isn't real. Well, there's a fucking example of it right there. There was a campaign, an active campaign, a while ago, trying to get him kicked off the team, to try and get his publishers to drop him. And that's just not right, man. And the biggest problem, he hasn't even done anything wrong. The absolute most that he's done is hint at what his opinions might be. And people have just jumped off the deep end and freaked out over this. And, I sound like a broken record at this point. I'm sure it's a vocal minority of people. And I'm sure that most of the people who are watching this are kind of in that same camp. But I want to talk about it because I feel like a lot of us kind of take him for granted. We take all the Battletech writers for granted. We take our fiction for granted. We take the quality of writing for granted. We nearly had somebody taken away from this setting who has contributed to it in one of the biggest ways. This is what I was talking about when I said we have to be careful about who we let in. A good example of whether or not somebody is, willing to put in the effort to learn this setting, and whether or not they're going to be reasonable with how they deal with the fiction. Look at how they're treating the people who write the fiction. If they're looking to cancel somebody and get them removed from the publishing because of opinions that they have, that's not somebody who is going to treat the canon with respect either. Because, they're not treating the writer with respect. Why would they treat his content with respect. That's something where they could easily hop in and say, well, this was written by the guy that we got kicked out, so clearly, that shouldn't be canon, that should be kicked out, it was written by a bad person. I've been talking about this for about a half hour now, and I feel like I haven't actually said a whole lot. I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is really tiring, and I just really don't want to see it in Battletech. This is how it started with so many other things that I've enjoyed throughout my life. It starts with, well, I guess starts isn't the right word. It typically starts with a sort of pushing against the fans where, you have somebody who enjoys the setting and you start saying that, well, that's not right, or you shouldn't think about it that way, or, criticizing people for having different opinions in your fan group. But without fail, it tends to shift to trying to cancel somebody who's involved in the creation of it. From there, it shifts to the stuff that they worked on. And, I've seen this cycle repeat over and over and over and over again, and it makes me very, very angry to see that it's happening here. And again, I know I'm late to the party here, but it frustrates me how little people have talked about this. There's a lot of people who seem to think that Battletech is invincible to all this sort of stuff. Nobody would come after Battletech. I mean, it's already got strong women in it. It's already got a matriarchal society in one place. It's got, egalitarianism and meritocracy all over the place. What's not to love? There's plenty of liberal ideas here. There's no reason to assume that anybody would come in and try and wreck it because there's nothing to criticize. Well, clearly there is. And if they can't find anything in the content itself, they go after the people who make it. And this is an example of a time where I agree with Razorfist, where he says that he talks about what he calls gatekeeping the gatekeepers, where he says the only people we need to gatekeep are the ones who try to say that Battletech isn't for everyone. I found that to be a little bit confusing at first, but I think I get it now. This is what he's talking about. People coming along and saying, well, Blamley Pardoe has viewpoints that we don't like, and so therefore he shouldn't be publishing Battletech stuff. Or, I'll read his Battletech stuff, but I'm not going to have any respect for him as a person. That right there is somebody who is attempting to gatekeep. That is somebody who is trying to have things change. They want it to be different. They want it to be the way that they want, and anyone else who disagrees isn't welcome. That's who we gotta be careful of, guys. And I'll be honest, I don't want to share the game table with somebody who tried to get Blamley Pardoe kicked out of Battletech. That's somebody who's tried to rid the franchise of one of my favorite parts of it. So I guess I'm more angry about this because it's a personal thing. This is a guy that I've admired. I mean, he's the reason that I have attempted to write Battletech fiction of my own. I enjoy his stuff so much, it inspired me with my own bits of creativity. And so, yeah, you better believe I get pretty pissed off when I see people treating him like this. I didn't even know this was going on. I consider myself to be pretty active in the Battletech community. I hadn't heard anything about this up until, the past week or so, when people are posting about it, commenting on videos and Facebook things. I had to go look this up. I had no idea this was going down. I think a lot of you guys might have missed it too. So while I've been sitting here rambling, perhaps incoherently as usual, I'd appreciate it if, when you're out engaging with the community and you see this sort of thing being said about one of the best writers that we have, stand up for the guy. Let people know that a lot of the things that are said about him are fake, but more importantly, what I'd love to see is an outpouring of support toward him. I get the feeling that since a lot of us, I see this in the Discord too, a lot of people that are in there are they have no idea this was going down either. I feel like what we should do as a community to show that, the vocal minority is just that, it's a minority. Now is the time for an outpouring of support for Mr. Pardoe. I'd like to see a lot of positivity thrown his way. If you're into shit posting, well, let's do some shit posting where we talk about what a kick-ass author he is, where we tell people, hey, you got to read this book because it's by Blamley Pardoe and he writes really well. or, just let him know that we here in the community appreciate him. Because if you read his response to the lies that were being put out about him, it's kind of hard to read. Not because it's badly written, but that's the interesting thing about it. I'll put a link to it down in the description. But I'm reading it and I'm noticing grammatical errors throughout, and it's not because Pardo isn't a good writer. It's because he's a good writer that it's so concerning. You can tell that when he wrote this, he was emotional. You can see that in it. As somebody who picks apart all the things that I write, meticulously trying to get every single word exactly the way that I want it, I know that when something is a little screwed up here and there, it's because you typed it in a hurry, or you were emotional and you didn't want to go back and read over it again, which I totally understand. So reading this, I can tell that he was in a tough spot when he wrote it, and honestly, it makes me want to go and just have a chat with him and offer him some tea. Let's sit down and talk about Battletech for a while and just chill out and have a good time. Because, like I said, it's hard to read, because the stuff that's been said about him is just absolutely horrific, and it'll give you more details, like things that I don't want to discuss in the course of a YouTube video. You can find all that there. So I would recommend that you go and you read through that to get a better idea of kind of what's been going on. And then if you decide that you want to, I'd recommend that you give him a little bit of support on whatever social media platform it is that you use. I think we should let this guy know that we appreciate the work that he's done. We love the work that he's put out. And if you're into reading the Battletech books, you've probably read several of his works, so I'm sure I don't need to tell you just how good his stuff can be. But I think that it's time that we let him know exactly how much we like it. So that's all I've got for today, you guys. And I'll be honest, I don't want to make content like this all the time that's a bit of a downer and kind of depressing and talking about something that I'm upset about. I like to keep the channel more positive. But this is something that I need to get off my chest. And so I appreciate you all bearing with me. And next time we talk, it'll be far more enjoyable because we'll be talking about the Bushwhacker. So until that video comes out, you guys, this is Mage Leader, signing off.